Hey, good evening, everyone. Cole Johnson here with Mojo with Cojo. It's January 23rd, 2025, about 6:20 p.m. I have my best good friend, Mr. Craig Voigt, joining me today, and he is someone I used to work with and someone whom I have maintained a relationship with for I don't know, Craig. How long have we known each other? 5, 6 years? Longer?
Probably closer to seven. Yeah.
7 years, yeah. So he's somebody that I consider a very good friend, best friend, whatever you want to say. So thanks for being with us, Craig.
Of course.
I really appreciate you doing this with me and for me. And again, I hope that people watching this, veterans and civilians alike, are able to kind of get some hope out of hearing our stories, your story, other people's stories that we're gonna share over the course of this uh, podcast. So again, Craig Voigt, he served in the United States Navy. He served for 7 years total, 6 years active duty, 1 year in the reserves. He's currently working for a rather large agency here in Buffalo that tries to help veterans um, housing and stuff like that. He's a devoted husband, a devoted father. He is a very good drummer. He's a part of a band. Some of the things that he loves are Star Wars, soccer, cooking, the Bills, the Buffalo Sabres, the Portland Timbers, the Portland Thorns, traveling, and my dear friend Cole. So again, brother, thanks for being here. Let's just go ahead and jump right on in
Okay.
to the questions. The first question is, how was your childhood?
So, my childhood. First, I want to thank you for letting me be a part of this. And I am very much looking forward to supporting you in this next chapter of your incredible existence.
Thank you, friend.
I think this is going to be great for a lot of people. I hope it is anyway. So, childhood. So I was born at Millard Fillmore Hospital in Buffalo, New York, and uh, lived. I was born in 1970, so my earliest memories of the 70s were pretty groovy. Um, my dad worked for National Fuel Gas, and my mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom, but she was also a part-time dental hygienist.
Okay.
Um, I went to Lindbergh Elementary School, and for like it now, I think so many kids take the bus, regardless of the distance that they live to the school. We
Mm.
never ever took the bus, so we walked to school. Um, and like 5 years old, I think my parents walked me there the first day,
Yeah, and they were like,
and
"You're
they're
you're
like,
on your own
you
now."
know, just follow those other kids.
Yeah.
Um, and but I mean, it worked out. I usually made it to school. Um, my childhood home was I mean pretty normal, right? We were pretty middle class. I mean, we weren't well off or rich by any stretch, but I don't feel like that we wanted for anything. We were
Mm,
never really hurting for food. I mean, sometimes dinner would be macaroni and cheese and spam,
mm,
but we didn't we didn't know. But we'd also
mm.
like go out for wings and pizza every now and again. Um,
Right.
Birthdays, like we didn't get presents like as a parent now. Like a great joy of mine is getting my kids little gifts here and there.
Hmm.
I mean, it also allows me to be a bit of a child again, um, and
Right.
collect all the cool things that my wife would typically yell at me about.
Right.
But so we did. The only time we really got gifts were birthday and Christmas.
Hmm.
Um, and But again, we didn't really want for anything. Um,
Right.
I had a brother. I mean, he's still around, um,
Right.
although we don't really communicate very much, uh,
Hmm.
which is it is what it is. Um, and both my parents supported each of us in kind of whatever we were interested in. You
Mm.
know, like I started to get interested in music around the same time I started to get interested in soccer, and they were very supportive of both those things to the extent that, you know, like my first band, which we didn't know how to play our instruments, my parents graciously let us make noise in the basement, and and it, you know, it worked out, and
Yeah.
it was fun, and we ended up actually learning our instruments, which was cool. Um, even uh, you know, like 1977, Star Wars came out. I was 7, and it had a big impact on me,
Yeah.
and it still does. So like every birthday and Christmas thereafter, you know, it was always like Star Wars stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, normal child, good. You know, like I think you know, when I talk to my therapist now, um, that I, you know, we talk about schemas and you know how my parents' parenting style and just how they interacted with us affected me. They had my folks. I would say, you know, we in therapy we call it an unrelenting standards schema.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
if I came home with an A minus, it was why didn't you get an A?
Why didn't you do better?
Yeah.
Right.
If I
Right. Right.
scored one goal in a game, well, why didn't you score a hat trick? You know,
Right.
so like,
It was never enough.
yeah, yeah. And I mean,
Right.
like, it was still like it was good for what it was, but
Mm.
it was, you know, never enough. Um, as I got older, and you know, your relationship with your parents changes, and you can kind of discuss some of those things. Um, they were flummoxed that, you know, that was a thing, and I'm like, well, I mean, kind of makes sense. Um, the other part of my childhood, like my parents were both alcoholics, um, both functional alcoholics, but alcoholics nonetheless.
Mm.
My dad kept a huge jug of wine under the kitchen sink, and he would prepare a lot of the meals, and it would seem to take forever for dinner to come because he's getting liquored up in the kitchen, you know.
Right.
Um, and mom would always have a couple glasses of wine while, you know, waiting for dinner. And they were smokers when we were kids, and that was a drag. No
Yeah.
pun intended. Uh,
Yeah, my grandfather smoked pretty much until the day he died, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, so my parents, uh, a fortuitous cancer scare, uh, you know, frightened them enough that they both quit cold turkey,
Yeah. Yeah,
which was great.
my mom quit. Well, I don't know if this is true. I would like to believe it's true, but she quit cold turkey whenever she had, or so when I say my mom, I mean my grandmother, because
Hmm.
you know that I was adopted, but the viewing audience or the listening audience might not know that because I haven't shared that yet. But I was adopted, and our grandmother was a habitual smoker up until I think my oldest brother Tony was born, and I've been told that they wouldn't let her into the hospital because she smoked. So she
Wow.
allegedly she stopped smoking cold turkey right then and there, and
Wow.
never smoked a cigarette a day ever after that. But then my dad, my grandfather, smoked like I said until his dying day. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
it was tough to watch.
my memory of childhood, like we always ate dinner together, um, and
Mhm.
after dinner, I would have to go get my parents' cigarettes in their ashtray
Mhm.
and bring it to the table, and they'd have like their after dinner
Like
cigarette.
their after dinner cigarette.
Yeah, and it was always just so fucking gross. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, ugh, it was my least favorite thing. And
Yeah.
and later on in my young adult life, I mean, I did a ton of drugs and I drank a ton of booze, but I never smoked cigarettes.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I think that's definitely rooted to being so grossed out by my parents' habit.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I can't talk too much. I smoke cigars from time to time. So,
hmm,
um but yeah, I'm not a big fan of cigarettes either, so I
yeah, I mean, like,
definitely
I'll like when you're in Turkey, you're going to sit down and you're going to smoke a hookah, right? Like if I'm
Right.
in
Yep.
Cairo, I'm going to smoke a hookah.
Yep.
So, but I
I
mean,
used to own a hookah before I joined the Marine Corps.
oh yeah,
Me and my boys used to get together on the weekends and we'd sit around and smoke a hookah. And then I joined the Marine Corps, and obviously I didn't take it with me, and I wound up giving it to one of my like I don't know close friends, and that was the
hmm
last I saw of it. It
I
was
mean,
this
and
big green monster of a hookah.
smoking hookahs is like smoking 18 cartons of cigarettes, like in one sitting. So
Yeah, well, we definitely smoked some.
yeah,
There was a hookah bar, a big hookah bar back in Gainesville. It was called Fairs on the Avenue, and that's where I got turned on to smoking hookahs. And
hmm
then I'm like, oh shit, I can buy one of these?
right.
And so I went and bought one. I had one, and then I filled it up because they say you're supposed to do cold water, or
hmm
it helps with the smoke if you do it with cold water.
Yep.
So I got the ingenious idea that I would pour water in it and then put it in the freezer.
Oh,
Well, I forgot that it was in the freezer, and when I went to get it out, it had
and
it
you
had
had pieces
broke
of
shattered.
hookah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, I enjoy. I used to enjoy smoking a hookah.
Yeah, there's like I live off of Hurdle Avenue, and there's several hookah bars down the street near Hurdle in Delaware.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So I'm sometimes tempted, but have not
Haven't
hit the
ventured
jump
in there
yet.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your childhood, or did you want to move on to the next?
I mean, what do we want to count as childhood? Like up until when?
Do you want to share a little bit? Again, this is totally up to you. Do you want to share a little bit about your past with, um, like drugs, or
Sure, 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 sure.
no?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so as kids, you're given chores to do, and one of the chores was doing the dishes because we didn't have a dishwasher.
Hmm.
Like going back to the middle classness of the family, we were the last block or we were the last house on the block to get a color television, and it wasn't up until oh my gosh, 1999. Um, my parents moved to Tennessee, and up to that point, they still did not get cable television.
Cable TV.
So we never had cable. We had a rotary antenna,
Yep.
and
Like rabbit ears, bunny ears, whatever.
it was well, it's up on the roof, and it comes with
Oh.
a dial thing. So like, and then it rotates the antenna up on the roof to
Oh
point
wow.
towards wherever the station is.
Oh.
And that fucking
I've
thing
never
was
even heard of that.
oh yeah, yeah. That thing was indestructible because I would just be like, so we could finally
Yeah.
get cable, but that thing never broke. So,
That's funny. That's
um,
funny.
but we had chores to do. One of my chores was doing the dishes, and I mentioned before that my dad kept the wine under the sink.
Yeah.
Uh, and it used to be they'd go to Premier Liquor and they'd buy like probably the most relatable brand. It would be like Carlo Rossi, right? But
Okay.
Premier had their own brand in like a big gallon jug,
Kind
and
of like the box of wine.
kind of like it was the precursor to the box of wine.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
then, in fact, when the box of wine came out, my parents were big fans, and I was a big fan because you could drink more without being able to see, right?
Right. Right.
Like when my dad sees that a third of his wine is gone, you know, and he's
Right.
he's you can't see it in the box, so
Right.
it was advantageous for my future alcoholism. But I would sit and I would drink like a Tupperware glass of wine while I did the dishes.
And how old were you?
I mean, I probably started drinking regularly at I don't know 12.
Yeah.
Where I do that a few times a week. Uh,
Yeah.
I had my first drink ever. I was 5. My dad was having like a business dinner party, and they were drinking martinis. And everybody was sitting in the living room. They, for whatever reason, they got up and left the living room. And I really liked olives as a kid.
Hmm.
And there's all these olives out in the living room, but I had to get to it, and
Mm.
the way to get to it was drinking the gin. So I got pretty torn up, and apparently I was hilarious. Um, but you know, it was you know a little foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we laugh about it now. Then it probably, I mean, I remember having, again, I'm adopted, and my grandparents raised my brothers and I, and we used to live in Orlando, Florida, and we lived next to this gentleman. His name was Mr. Rowe. I'll never forget this man. He was just the sweetest, kindest old man that you'd ever meet in your life, and he would always go to the corner store and get a silver bullet, like a Bud silver
mhm.
bullet or whatever. And it was always it was one of the tall boys, so it was, whatever, that big. And then it was always in a brown paper bag. And the first time I ever drank a beer or had a sip of beer was with him on his front porch. And
Mhm.
I was probably 5 or 6 years old whenever that happened too. So
Yeah,
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 like
and yeah, getting frequent sips of beer from Dad was that was normal,
right,
right?
right.
Like Schmidt's Bavarian or Go. Like my dad bought the worst beer ever. Uh, but it was always a thrill to get a sip of Dad's beer.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
go ahead.
and then, so, and now, how long have you've been sober for quite some time, right?
26 years now. It'll
That's
be
awesome.
27 years in April.
That's
So
awesome, man.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Now, did the again, if you don't mind me asking, the alcohol obviously led to harder stuff, harder drugs, right?
Yeah. So I mean, drinking. It, I was as I was drinking at age 12. I was also very aware that I never wanted to do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
The whatever school it wasn't the Dare program or the Say No to Drugs program. I mean,
Mm,
it was the Say No to Drugs program, but they would show you videos of like what drugs would do to you and how crazy you were, and like, no way am I going to do drugs. Um,
right.
but then drinking enough, and I shortly after, like probably age 14, I probably started playing the drums. Age 15, we started the band,
Mm,
and it was age 15 that I first smoked pot.
okay.
And then things seemed to escalate quickly. I smoked pot, and then my brother one day was like, "Do you want to try acid?" And I'm like, "Sure." And so he gave me some acid on like a school night, and I'm sitting in the living room with my parents, and then I'm like, I've got like we had a redone basement, so
Mm.
Timmy saw that I was staring at the wall in a weird way, and he's like, let's get him down in the basement.
Were you drooling?
Yeah, I mean, it was like you see stuff, and when it's the
Yeah, yeah,
first time you see that, it's pretty amazing.
yeah, yeah.
So and you don't have the wherewithal to try and hide your amazement from your parents.
All right,
So
right,
we skedaddled out of there, and
right.
then one of my friends who was also sold marijuana. I called him up one day. I was like, "Hey, can you get me some weed?" And he's like, "No, but I'll be right over." And he comes over, and again, like this is like we're in high school,
Yeah.
and my mom is upstairs doing something in the kitchen, and we're down in the basement. Like we had a couch and like a stereo and stuff and rugs and stuff. Like it was like a den. And he pulls out this bag of coke and
Oh.
chops it up, and we're like, "Oh, okay, let's see what this does." And Shazam, like
And how old were you?
this was probably 16, 17.
Wow.
you know,
Yeah.
um, and then and playing in a band, like it's cliche about the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing, but
Yeah. But
cliches are
it's true.
cliches because they're
It's
true.
true.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
And so like, and especially being like a band of young kids, people thought it was hilarious to like throw drugs our way or, you know,
Right.
make sure we were drunk and whatever.
Well, and you were and your band was you were like punk rock, right? Kind of, sort of, like
Yeah. Yeah. Like I mean, I think you'd probably call us alternative nowadays, but yeah.
yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, it was very much the culture, like to get fucked up and play music.
Right. So if you don't again, if you don't mind me asking, what was the catalyst to you becoming sober? Like what made you what drove you to become sober?
So I was 28 years old. I was working at a liquor store and a bar. Um, there, like, I'm living in a shithole apartment,
Hmm.
like zero prospects, right? Like, looking
Hmm.
to my future, there was just nothing.
Yeah.
And so it was, and people around me, were pointing out time and time again that I had an issue with drinking. Like
Hmm.
the band I was in at the time, I don't know how many times I got kicked out of that band for drinking. Um, but like one practice, I had a magnum of vodka in my bag and was just like drinking, and they're like, "No, you're done.
Yeah.
You're fired." Um, and thankfully, they took me back, and they were a massive support through uh, rehab in my very early recovery.
Hmm.
Um, but so I think just zero future.
Yeah.
Like I was depressed,
Hmm.
and I was very seriously contemplating suicide,
Hmm.
and it was just bleak, you
Yeah.
know. So one day, my last day of drinking um, was April 17th, 1998.
Mm.
Um, I was out of the shitty apartment and living with my parents temporarily. I had hoped, um, and I woke up. I had a couple beers for breakfast. I had to work at 10. I had to open the liquor store at 10 o'clock. So I had a couple beers, took the bus down, opened up the liquor store. I was the only one. I was running the liquor store alone that day.
Hmm.
So I had a couple bottles of wine when I got there. I was taking amphetamines all day. And every time I walked by the little airplane display bottle, I'd drink one of those. Um, and I mean, so I probably had 10 or 12 of those. Drank a 4 pack of Jack Daniels coolers and drank another bottle of wine. And then 4 o'clock rolls around and I get off of work. And the bar I worked at was just down the street. So I hopped back on the bus and stopped off at the bar to have a beer. And one of the regulars was, like, hey, let's drink. And
Hmm.
a fifth of Jack Daniels later,
Mm.
it's 6 o'clock, and I end up at my parents' house. I don't know how I got to my parents' house, but I got there, and I start just kind of freaking out, and my mom starts to get worried, and I'm talking about hurting myself,
Mm.
and she calls the police. Um, five Kenmore police are holding me on the floor of my parents' living room, and I'm telling them, "Don't patronize me." The ambulance comes. I get in the ambulance and I blew a .396 on
Wow.
my way to detox. And I had stopped drinking at 6 o'clock. So at 6 o'clock, I was a .42, which should kill many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
irony is that my alcoholism probably saved my life that night.
Right.
Um, I went to detox for 3 days at ECMC, and in that time, um, it I can't pinpoint one specific moment, but there was a physical feeling of weight being lifted off my shoulders,
Hmm.
and just I don't have to lie anymore, and I
Yeah.
can answer the phone, and I can start over, and I'm not worthless, and you know I can do something,
Right.
and I mean it was palpable, and
Yeah.
and that relief, man, that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
came home from detox, waited a couple days until a bed opened up in the rehab, and then spent 21 days in rehab, and got out. Like and rehab was good for me. There was a lot of good people in rehab, um, and just as kind of a unsavory element was entering rehab. Like it was a 28-day program, but I left after 21 days, and the timing was right because a very you could just feel the heaviness of the people that were starting to come in,
Yeah.
and it was not a good vibe. Uh,
Right.
but I got out and uh, made some quick amends, like to the owner of the liquor store and the owner of the bar,
Mm.
um, and uh, signed up for school. I was considered disabled at that point.
Mm.
Like I was an outpatient. My outpatient substance abuse recovery was when I filled out the intake. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder,
Mm.
anxiety, um, alcohol dependence, severe, uh, cannabis dependence,
Mm.
cocaine abuse, amphetamine dependence. Um, they didn't really have a, or I don't remember the category for hallucinogens. Um,
Mm.
but so it's like it was a pretty long laundry list of
Yeah.
crazy things.
Yeah.
Um, but I went to outpatient diligently. I tried to do a little bit of AA. The group that I found were like these militant young guys, and they're like,
Mm.
"You're gonna have to go to 3 meetings a day, and you're gonna get your recovery in the 5 o'clock meeting, and this is gonna be your sponsor." And like it just didn't feel like what I had read about AA
Mm.
and other meetings that I had experienced were not like this. And they're like, "You're gonna have to quit your band because they're not in it free." And I'm like, "Those are the people that have stuck by me, so no,
Yeah.
I'm not quitting."
Yeah.
So and I think that kind of soured AA for me for a while.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, like I've certainly grown to appreciate AA, and I know that it's there if I ever want to need it. And I've gone back to a meeting here and there, and it just gets very emotional for me. You
Yeah.
know, like to see people in the spot that I was in, um, and then to see people with even more clean time than I got. Um, it's just it. I think you've got a choice, like live to recover or recover to live, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Um,
Right.
but I think you kind of need to phase in and out of them to in order to kind of realize what life is
Right.
about. I enrolled at ECC and got my associate's degree in drug and alcohol counseling. Vested is, I was talking about being considered disabled. Vested was a huge help in that. The New York State uh, disability program, like they paid for my books all
Oh,
throughout
very nice.
college,
Very nice.
like bus passes and stuff.
Mm.
And that was a huge benefit. Um, college was going good, so I figured I'd go get my bachelor's degree. And they didn't have a bachelor's degree in substance abuse counseling, but they had a bachelor's degree in social work. So I started doing social work, went to Buff State. I was in the honors program at ECC. I was in the honors program at Buff State. And college was still going cool. So I decided I'd go get my master's and got accepted into the advanced standing program at UB. And, went from no college to a master's degree in 4 years and a semester.
Wow.
Um, I took intersemester courses. I think when you're a non-traditional student,
Yeah.
and especially after overcoming the muck and the craziness that derails most younger
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
I think I was focused and I was excited to be in school, and um, you, you very rarely got funny looks when you're 30 years old, almost 30. No, I'm in college.
Right.
Uh, People are like, oh, well, you
Right.
must have been fucked up, but good job.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was. I mean, I think the hardest part. Um, what I mean, I was working as well, and I was a busboy. So like being a 30-year-old busboy and,
Yeah.
and maintaining your self-esteem has some challenges.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
for sure. Yeah.
and especially like when you saw like, and it was a nice restaurant, and so high school friends or acquaintances would come in and like I'm clearing their dishes and getting their bread, and I'm like, oh man, I wonder what they think. Um,
Right.
but at the same time, I was also like, you know what, fuck everybody because
Mm.
I've got to do this for me,
Right.
and
Right.
you know this is this is what it is.
Right.
So, and then I was finishing up grad school, and I decided I wanted to join the Navy. So I joined the Navy Reserves and did that for a bit, went active duty.
And so what made you want to join the military?
So back in when I was in high school, um, and my parents were noticing my decline. Like I was a good student in high school. Like I was on the honor roll, and I was captain of the soccer team, and I was in the concert band. Senior year went a little south.
Mm.
I almost didn't graduate because I skipped so much because I was getting
Mm.
high
Mhm.
um, uh, and drinking. And I quit the. I was captain of the soccer team. And I quit the soccer team. Um, so they were a little worried, and they're like, "Well, how about you just join the military, and they'll fix you up."
Yeah.
And so I joined the army straight out of high school. I did well enough on my ASVAB that the recruiter was excited, and but I didn't want to join the army.
Right.
So a day before the physical, I smoked a big fat joint, and then I wasn't in the army anymore, much to my
Right.
recruiter's chagrin. Um,
There weren't any waivers for that back then, I'm assuming, yeah?
no, there were not. That was a fortuitous period of testing, for sure. Um, then, like finishing up grad school, I was just like, well, you know what? They have social workers in the military, and I had always had um, a feeling of the need to perform my civic duty,
Mm.
and also I wanted to travel and see the world.
Mm.
My family has a pretty strong military background. My dad was in the army and uh, was on his way to Korea when he was one of two medics plopped off the boat at Alaska on their way to Korea. So he,
Oh.
he lucked out there and got to hang out in Alaska. My aunt was in the Air Force. My uncle was a warrant officer in the Coast Guard. My grandfather um, wanted to fight in World War One,
Mm.
um, but they realized that he was 16, and like
Yeah.
he was in, and they're like, "Oh, you're 16, no."
Oh
So
my God.
they sent him back.
Wow.
So there's kind of been
Excuse me.
always that in my family,
Mm.
and so I joined the Navy Reserves, and I was an E3 with a master's degree.
Nice. So you were in the reserves for a year and then you went active duty Navy?
Yeah, a year, maybe a little more than a year.
Were
Um,
you enlisted or were
yeah,
you an officer?
no, I was enlisted, and
Okay.
you had to be you had to be licensed to get a direct commission in the Navy for social work.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Now there was a program that existed at the time that I got admitted to later, um,
Mm.
but my recruiter was not so scrupulous to let me know about that program. Um,
In the beginning.
yeah, which
Right.
would have changed my trajectory probably greatly.
So, active duty Navy, the first year was reserve.
Yep.
After
But
that, it was
I
active duty, and then.
Yeah, I joined the Navy as an operations specialist. So I was an OS 3, and uh, at that time, uh, the war was really switching, like really needed to call up more reservists, especially on the
Yeah.
medical side.
Right.
And so, a medical component from the reserve center that I was at got deployed to Germany, and I'm like, that sounds neat. I would like to do
Yeah.
that. So, but I wasn't going to go to Germany as an OS. So I changed my rate to a corpsman and submitted my transcripts. And I mean, like I've got a master's degree in social work. I can be a psych tech, you know,
Right.
without anything. So I
Right.
put in my papers, and they made me a corpsman psych tech, and I was pulled up on the next deployment to Landstuhl,
Nice. How
which
and so how long how was Germany and how long were you in Germany?
I was in Germany for 15 months. Um, Germany was awesome. Um, it like you felt good about the mission
Hmm.
because it was like you were doing stuff,
Hmm.
like um, it seeing people recover, seeing people show up really fucked up, and then leaving in a much better spot. I did a lot of PTSD screenings. Um, we did manpower missions. Um, so manpower missions, you get hurt in Iraq, you fly to Balad, get stabilized, and then fly to Ramstein, take a bus 10 minutes down the road to Landstuhl, and we unload all the wounded and casualties. Um, prior prior to getting deployed, the reason why I was able to go active duty is I was on the funeral honors team, and then orders for a funeral honors coordinator came up, and I was fortunate to get that position. And I did.
So what did that entail? Like what were you doing? What was that job?
So funeral honors coordinator for the Nosk Buffalo. Um, it was a pretty wide spread that we covered.
Uh,
Southern Ontario, uh, and you might be thinking Canada. Why would you cover Canada? We had several Canadians. I mean, like there's a lot of Canadians in the American military,
yeah.
um, and all the way down to like Erie, PA. So we covered a lot. And what would happen is a veteran would pass away, um, and you would provide the funeral honors. You would coordinate with the funeral home. You'd bring a team with you. You'd
I
bring
gotcha.
fold the
So you're
flag,
doing taps and folding the
yeah,
flag and
presenting the flag,
presenting and all that. Right. I
and
gotcha.
then
I
like
gotcha.
active duty casualties or combat casualties. You got firing squad, honor, 21 gun
Hmm.
salute. You had to get an officer to present the flag, um, and when we could, we got a live horn player, but mostly
Mm.
it's still a recording. But I did like 500 funerals. Um,
Mm.
you know
I can't imagine, man.
that like it sounds super morbid, and
Yeah.
at times like you see these families in despair, or I mean even worse, you would do the honors, and there's one person standing
Hmm.
there, and you're like, man, like this
Yeah.
poor guy, like he died alone,
Yeah.
like alone,
Yeah.
alone. And that was super sad, you know. Um, but I enjoyed the work in the sense that um, I felt really good about helping to provide that closure and to honor these guys
Mm.
in a way that was meaningful to their family.
Right. And respectful and
Yeah,
you know dignifying and
yeah. So it was a good experience. Uh,
yeah.
we got to do some training in Arlington, at the National Cemetery, and those guys, oh my gosh, like they don't pick you for any like there's a bunch of E1s and E2s, and they
Yeah.
don't pick you for any other reason than you're 5'11" and you're 160 pounds,
Right.
and
Right.
you fit in the uniform well, and you're all the same, like your shoulders are all the same level.
Right. Right.
But then they train them crazy. Like they do the silent fold and a 6-person fold and an 8-person fold and 2-person, and it's just like it's like a dance, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. That was cool.
That yeah, that I watched what was it, I don't know. I think it was it a documentary or something. I don't know, but anyway, it was about the Marine Corps um uh pallbearers, or I don't know the name of them, but essentially what you're talking about, but it's the Marine Corps version of it. And excuse me. That I mean those guys were like, I mean, built like brick shit houses, bro. I mean, like
Yeah, yeah. Like
so
you have to. Coffins are not light,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you can't be like shaken under it, and you can't be quick,
right,
and like you.
right.
I mean, thankfully that was rarely required of me. But it's. I mean, I think it's a noble and um, valuable job
Yeah, for
for
sure.
sure.
And then you spent 15 months in Germany and then you came back to the States,
Yeah.
or?
So, 15 months in Germany. I did a year deployment, and then I signed up for another year. Um, in that time of signing up for the second year, uh, I spoke to an officer recruiter and got accepted into the uh, Health Services Collegiate Program,
Mm,
HSCP program. Yeah, HSCP, which was the program I should have started in.
when
Um,
you first signed?
yeah, where they'll take
Right,
a master's level social worker and get them their
right,
clinical hours, and then you sit for the licensing exam, pass it, and then you get your commission as an officer.
right.
Um, and I got accepted. I left Germany, came to Portsmouth Naval Hospital, um, uh, and started that program, and it was going great. Um, I You enter the program as an E6, and you have the chance to get a meritorious promotion in the middle up to E7. And
Mm,
I got that promotion, and I got letters of commendation from admirals. I got Navy Marine Corps achievement ribbon. Like I was doing great, and then things went off the rails in the last 2 months,
mm,
and my supervisor, like, just craziness, like that's more so than seeing the things I saw on manpower missions and in the med surge units, and more than the funerals. That fucked me up more than
mm,
anything. The way it was, just like I was working at in the HIV clinic at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital. I get
mm,
a call, go up and see your lieutenant. And I go up, and there's MPs standing there, and there's other officers there, and there's a master chief there. And they're like, you didn't do a suicide screen on this person. Um, and in the maternity ward. And so you're being dismissed from the program. And
really, just like that?
it was literally just like that. They had well, let me back up. A couple weeks before that, they had put me on probation for
Mm,
like no good reason.
mm,
Um, and and this is like these. I just made E7.
right,
Like I've got all these letters from admirals. I'm
right.
crushing it, right? Like you having worked in the VA, about RVUs, right? That's
Yeah,
how you quantify your work. I, as an intern at the social work department at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, was leading the entire department in RVUs, right? I had changed
yeah,
programs. They used to in the mother baby ward, they used to you have to watch a 10-minute video about like don't shake your baby. Um,
Yeah.
and I changed that from just watching a 10-minute video to, you know, and instead of just saying don't shake your baby, I implemented real things to calm a baby down, like
Right.
Dr. Karp's 5 S's and how to swaddle a baby. And I had service members going up and swaddling kid like a little baby doll. They still use that program to this day. Um, so like there was just no reason, and
Yeah.
I was just blindsided, you know. Um, two uh, 2 months. It was 9 days before Christmas. 2 months before I'm going to be done
Mm-hmm.
and get my commission, and then 3 months before I'm supposed to get married. And they're like, "Nope, you're done." And tell me, and anybody out there in podcast land who served, tell
Mm-hmm.
me if you've ever heard of someone getting kicked out of the military in 3 days,
Yeah.
right? Like they came and to get my stuff, and then 3 days later, I'm in Dam Neck and I'm signing papers that I'm no longer in the military. Thankfully, they gave me an honorable discharge. They gave me the
Yeah.
code that I couldn't join back for a year or something.
Yeah.
But it was devastating.
That's
It
crazy,
was
man.
it was
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, you
Cause
can
I
murder
mean,
somebody in the military
yeah,
and you don't get kicked out in 3 days.
I mean, you can have sexual relations with underage
Yeah,
freaking, and you know, get demoted.
yeah,
You don't get kicked out, at least not right away. you
yeah.
know?
So it was some craziness,
Yeah.
and that really and to this day, I feel the effects of that. That really shook me to my core, and like my faith in humanity, and
Hmm.
my like just not knowing what I did or didn't do. Like I know it wasn't just doing one suicide screen to a super happy new mom.
Right. Right.
It like to this day I'm fucked up by it.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, I think that, well, I know that unfortunately, you're not the only one that has had or has a story like that. You know what I mean? Like there
Right.
are, and not to get off subject or not to digress, but there are plenty of people. I mean, I served with a bunch of guys that because they were, I don't know, a couple pounds overweight or they couldn't tape out, or they were busted up so bad that they couldn't run a freaking PFT test or a CFT, which is the combat fitness test, which is another physical fitness test that the Marine Corps does now. That got implemented closer to when I like as I was getting out, but yeah, like I don't know, man. And it sucks because you are very good at what you do. You know what I mean? Like you are, I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from other people that, work at the VA and all that stuff. But like, I don't know, like you like to meet people where they're at. You know what I mean? And I think oftentimes people forget that we're human, we're people, we're human beings. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to throw all this medical mumbo jumbo jargon at these people.
Right.
Just like I said in one of my first videos, like it just be.
Right.
Just even if you don't say anything, you don't even have to talk to the person. Just
Be present.
being able to be present with that person
Yeah.
in that time when they need somebody the most speaks volumes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you don't even have to
Um,
understand the crisis that they're in. You just have to understand that it is a crisis to them and
right.
they
And
need
and they're human.
yeah.
That we're human and
Yeah.
shit's not always going to go the way it's supposed to or the way we want it to. You know what I mean? It's all about how, adapt and overcome. But yeah, man, that I you and I have talked about this in the past, but I can't,
Right. And
the fact that you still and you work for the federal government still, you know what I mean, to this day, so the fact that you are able kind of set that aside and still, fight the good fight and still want to help people, speaks volumes about your character and who you are. And, you
Well,
know,
I appreciate that.
of
It,
course, it's the truth, man. It's the truth.
I appreciate that.
So, so getting out wasn't the best experience for you,
No,
obviously.
no. And so like the 3 day class that you have to kind of switch from military to civilian, I wasn't
Mm,
afforded that luxury.
yeah, they just
Yeah,
said you got to go.
yeah, yeah.
So what did you do? Like where so you did you come back to Buffalo? Because you
No,
were
stayed in Portsmouth, Virginia. We were living in Norfolk at the time.
and
My
so you were about to get married, right?
Yeah, so my fiance had finished her grad school and
Hmm.
finally agreed to marry me, and uh, we're going to get married that March. And so I just went into a wicked depression for
Yeah,
a couple months, and I'm like, hey, look, if you don't want to marry me, I understand, because this is not the you know this was not the bill of goods that you were sold. You
right.
were we were gonna do Navy officer stuff and make Navy officer money and
Mm,
and be set for the future. And now I'm unemployed. You
mm,
know? So if you want to not marry me, I understand. But she's a trooper, and
mm.
for whatever reason, I think she loves me.
She
Because
does love you, man.
she
A lot of
she
people love you.
thank you. She stuck by me, and we had a lovely wedding. And when we left for the wedding, I had no job, and by the time we came back from the wedding, like a week later, I had two jobs. I got a job at Virginia Beach City Schools, and I got a job at Virginia Child and Family Services.
Very
So,
nice.
it all came around, and thankfully, right, and this also, you know, makes me scratch my head. My clinical supervisor was kind enough. So when I left the Navy, I was kind of left in limbo for getting my clinical license for social
Mm,
work. My clinical supervisor recognized that I was done wrong, and she very kindly stayed with me to finish my hours and help me take the exam and all that and get my C.
wow.
So, that's partly validating, because if I did fuck up so big, I don't think she would have stuck by my side.
Right.
You know,
Now, can we backtrack real quick? Did just to kind of cover. So did anyone give you an explanation of why, like what happened? Why did I get kicked out for no apparent reason?
nope,
There was no which it's the military. I mean,
nope,
they don't have to tell you anything, but
nope. And because I was technically an intern, so it was some student status, so I
yeah,
had no recourse at all. There was no appeal process. There was no nothing. Like, you're
jeez,
out. And again, this happened in 3 days.
yeah, yeah,
You can't order a pair of boots in 3 days.
right. You can't do anything in the military in 3 days.
You know,
I mean, it took me a month to check out of the Marine Corps.
yeah,
So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's insane, dude. So you got married, you're in Virginia,
yeah,
you 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 got a job.
yeah.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and if there is a silver lining with your story, at least as far as the military is concerned, the fact that you were given an honorable discharge is, you
Tremendous.
know, yeah,
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 I don't know if it was a clerical oversight, or if they're like, well, we're fucking this guy pretty hard. Let's at least give him an honorable discharge. But I
right.
I don't think my detractors had that in mind, though. You know,
Mm,
and again, like, I wouldn't have gotten letters of recommendation from every coworker at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital if I was some big fuck up.
right, 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 right. Yeah, I can definitely. I mean, I struggle with self-worth and all that stuff, so I could definitely see how that would be a massive morale you know
Yeah, it'll knock your self esteem down a couple
dump.
inches.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, but I don't know, man. Like I don't really don't even have any words for it other than it's just fucked up, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, like
Um,
prior to this, you and a small handful of people were the only ones who I told that story to. My typical story of like, why'd you get out of the Navy? I'm like, well, first duty station was going to be in Japan, and my wife didn't want to be that far away from the family, and I had a chance to get out, so I did.
right. Well, I thank you for sharing and being you know um for sharing the
Yeah,
truth,
of
or,
course. I mean, it's like you said, like you. I'm not the only one you know who was treated that way, and if talking about it can help one person, then I think job well done.
right, right. So, so what happened with the two jobs? Did you work both jobs, or did
I
you
I
just work
worked
one, or?
I worked both jobs for a while, and then I left the uh, Virginia Child and Family Services. That
Mhm.
job I was running like a fatherhood group in
Mhm.
the Tidewater Regional Jail, and
Oh,
so talking to prisoners about like how their incarceration affects their kids and
right.
like how when you get out, what are you going to do? How can you be a better person slash dad?
Mhm.
And at the time, that was when those Somali pirates, the
Mm.
whole Captain Phillips thing,
Yep.
and they were being held at the Tidewater Regional Jail. So I'd have to like walk by their quad to get to my group,
Oh,
which
wow.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So then when did you move to Portland, or when did you guys move to Portland?
So I got my license, and um,
You got your C.
yeah, as a
You
social
got your
worker,
clinical, right?
yeah, as a social worker, when you get your C and you're a licensed clinical social worker, that really opens up every door for you.
That
Uh,
means you can diagnose people,
yep, yep,
right?
can practice independently, and it's like it's the save for a doctor, like it's the highest credential, and it's easily the highest functional credential that you can get as a social worker.
Right.
Um, so I just looked on USA Jobs, and I'm like, Caitlin, where do you want to live? And she's like, well, I'll go anywhere. We were really stoked about Portland,
Hmm.
uh, but so I probably dropped, you know, 50 applications, did maybe a dozen interviews. It was coming down. I had been speaking to a lady in Watertown to work at Fort Drum as the domestic
Yep.
violence coordinator,
Yep.
and that would have been a GS 12, and living in Watertown, New York. I don't know if you
And
put.
that's outside of Buffalo. Yep.
Yeah, it's north of Buffalo. It's kind of like the Thousand Islands almost.
Right.
Um, and while the Thousand Islands are beautiful and the Adirondacks are beautiful, and a quick trip to Montreal is nice, Watertown is a teeny little town, and
Yeah.
there's not a lot there.
Right.
Um, but I wasn't hearing back from it. We were really hoping to hear back from Portland. That's the one that we were most excited about. Um, and literally the day before I was going to sign the papers for Fort Drum, Portland called that night as I was pulling in from work to go home. And Caitlin was in the car, and uh, Portland calls, like, well, would you like the job in Portland? And I almost passed out. It was unreal. So Caitlin and I were thrilled, and we made all the plans to move out there and took the cats and went across country.
Now, how long did you live? So, how long did you live in Virginia before you went to Portland?
Uh, three years, 3.5 years, maybe 4 years.
And then you got your job at a a VA
Yeah,
in Portland, right?
yeah,
But it was like an intake center kind of
yeah.
thing,
It was a CRRC,
which
uh,
is a what community,
Community Resource and Referral Center.
right?
Um,
And
so
so, how long did you live in Portland? How long did you guys live in Portland?
4.5, 5 years. So and Portland was just awesome. It was a dream. Um,
Now, were you always a Portland Timbers fan and Thorns fan, or what was that? Did that become a thing whenever you were while you were in Portland?
no, so I was always a soccer fan, and I loved
Right,
playing soccer, and I loved watching soccer. And then to be in a city that had two soccer teams, right,
right,
in the at the highest level in the states, and the women's team was especially exciting, because you would see like the women's team is awesome and has been awesome.
yeah,
So Alex Morgan played for the Portland Thorns at the time, and Tobin Heath played for the Portland Thorns. So you could see all these amazing national team players, and then the rest of the national team are on the dozen other teams in the women's league. So you got to see the best women players in the world, and it was awesome.
right. And now, and you also are an avid patch collector, correct?
So that really like I didn't get in the patch game until uh, I was leaving Portland. And then
Okay,
and they're so Timbers and the Thorns have a huge patch culture. Not coincidentally, I happen to have several patches here that need to be put away.
nice, very
Uh,
nice.
and this is this is like I just have freezer bags
Full of patches. Those are all patches.
of patches. And with varying themes, like there's cartoons and movies and superheroes, and there's like a rock and roll. This is my rock and roll bag. This is like
Nice,
this is my Star Wars bag. So I got very much into the patch culture. How
very
about,
nice. So then you lived in Portland for 4 or 5 years, right? You
yeah,
did your thing at the CRRC,
yeah.
and then what happened?
So we had our son Miles, and the house in Portland was small. Like I think it was like 800 square feet, and family of three. We could have stuck it out with a family of three, but Caitlin was itching to have another baby,
Yeah, right,
and so and at that like the housing market in Portland was insano, like
right. Mm,
crazy. So we couldn't afford a bigger house, um, and if we had to rebuy our house, we couldn't even afford it.
oh,
So
wow.
I was we came back to vacation in Buffalo, and somebody who I had gone to grad school with worked in the Buffalo VA homeless program, and I'd given an application, kind of just as a shits and giggles,
Right.
and she was like, How serious are you about moving back to Buffalo?" And I'm like, "How serious are you about giving me a job?"
Yeah.
And then that worked out, and so
Nice.
we ended up coming back to Buffalo. I came back a little bit before the rest of the family, um, and the met you and everybody at the homeless program, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history. Nice, nice. Yeah, just I don't know, like you and I have always been super close, and I think that um kind of some of your childhood is kind of mirrors my childhood, and there's definitely a lot like, when you were talking about being a kid and when you kind of were at rock bottom with substance abuse and all that stuff, that I felt that way. That's one of the driving factors behind me joining the military, was because much like you, like I woke up one day and I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to.
Mhm.
I don't want to say I was a loser, but I was a fucking loser. You know what I mean? Like and I'm not saying that you were a loser. You know,
No,
I'm just
I
me.
was
That's how I felt.
I was absolutely a loser. Don't, yeah,
Um,
by definition, I'm sure.
and like you sharing that part of your story, like it really made me feel like we are, you know, I think you and I are cut from the same cloth in a lot of things. And you know, I'm just super happy that you are here, and I'm so proud of you and all your accomplishments and everything that you
Aw. Well, I can say right back at you, and I know the stress and weight that you were under just prior to this. So to see the light and energy that surrounds you now, and to see you with the get up and go to start this, and spread your wings and fly solo is talk about being proud, right? Like, and I don't have any like I want to support you in every way I can, but this was all you. You know, I mean, you bought a mic and everything, and so it
I
like
still haven't figured out how to use.
it's you know the it it's definitely right back at you for sure. I love you like a brother.
Yeah, and I'm definitely proud to call you my brother, and there isn't anything in this world that I wouldn't do for you and your family.
I know,
Um,
and you know that it holds true for me as well. You know, you are remarkable in like you're. I don't think people may or may not know that you're a single dad and you're raising two incredible kids, and like I don't know where you keep your cape, but you're doing an incredible job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Um, so anyway, I'm sorry for getting emotional. I just want you to know that I'm super happy and grateful for you as a friend and a brother. And I'm glad you came to Buffalo, and I'm glad that we are friends. Are there any closing remarks that you'd like to
I mean, I was
say or
make a joke like the reason really you're crying is because you ran out of crayons to eat.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. You caught me.
So no, just I'm super proud of you. I'm super excited for this podcast and to see where you go with it and where it takes you. And I thought the first episode was fantastic. And
Thank you.
I mean, I can only see good things happening for you in this project. So thank you
Thank you
so
very
much
much.
for letting me be a part of it. I
Of
very much
course.
appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for wanting to be a part of it and for sharing your story and yeah, just being you, man. I mean, I think that a lot of times people are afraid to just be themselves, and I think that, you and I are we don't have to wear a mask around one another, like we can be ourselves and we don't have to we don't have to worry about it. So I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
that in itself speaks volumes
Zero
for
zero fucks to give in my pocket.
yeah, so but all right, well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up and again, Craig, thank you for everything. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your hectic day to share your story with all of us. And
Thank you so much for
I,
having.
of course, I think what I'd like to do, maybe in a couple weeks or maybe a month or so, maybe we'll do like a follow-up interview.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. I'm always up for it.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Cole Johnson with Mojo for Cojo. Thank you
Go
for being
Bills.
here, and go Bills.
Hi.